This presentation on winch operations pertains to the Greater Sydney area, HEMS, and it's from the perspective of one of the physicians. It was prepared for and presented at the Retrieval 2014 conference in Glasgow. Now, in our service, we use the terms winch and hoist interchangeably. We do a number of missions that involve winching, and they're frequently making their way to the media, so they're pretty high-profile jobs, as this demonstrates.
Then, 20 metres, I'd say.
At 11:40 a.m. this morning, paramedics responded to a 000 call that a 16-year-old boy had fallen 20 metres down a cliff face in DY. Now, as a result of this fall, he has landed on a small rock face. He has also sustained multiple abrasions to his body and also his face. He was eventually reached by Special Access Team paramedics who stabilised him carefully at the scene before our ambulance medical rescue helicopter winched him up to safety.
855, 500, we are westbound.
In this particular incident, the challenge was reaching the patient and winching the patient up to safety, and he was on a very small rock face, which he was fortunate to have landed on.
I have traffic shuttle keep to the north-east, traffic running. Yeah, okay, Delta Yankee, Hotel Yankee Charlie, got your side of thanks.
He has now been transported to Royal North Shore Hospital in a serious but stable condition.
7. No worries.
Now, a patient like that falling onto a coastal rock platform is quite a common scenario for us, and because of potential spinal injuries, he's winched up in a stretcher. Now, in our service, it's the physician who does all stretcher winches, and we train both our paramedics and physicians to winch. The physician does the stretcher winches, but there is a danger that the stretcher could go into a spin, and so we have something called a tagline, which you can see in this photo is the yellow cord connecting the edge of the stretcher to the ground, and it's coming off onto the bottom right-hand corner of this picture. So on the other end of that will be the paramedic on the ground, ensuring the stability of the doctor and the winch stretcher. And then once the stretcher's aboard, the paramedic then comes up with the remainder of the equipment. Paramedics do the slight majority of all winches because they will also do the strop winching, as you can see here in this snow scenario. So a patient that doesn't require a stretcher will be winched up by a paramedic in a harness or a strop like this. Now, there are a number of environments in our New South Wales geography that necessitate winch access. For example, heavy bushland, the Blue Mountains and the canyons associated with that, the coastal areas, as I've already said, which includes water rescue, and all the water rescues are done by paramedics. The aircraft you saw in the previous clip was the EC-145. We also have AW-139s, and there's some data on the winch performance characteristics of that particular aircraft. A long winch with a high safe working load of over 270 kilos, a large braking strain, and a high maximum winch speed. Now, it's important to say we have completed winch rescues at the full extension of our usable cable, so we have done some pretty high up missions which carry their own challenges in terms of the psychological confrontation, the potential stress that can induce if one is not prepared, and we'll talk about the preparation for winch missions shortly. How often are we doing it? Well, sometimes we will just send the paramedic down, the doctor will stay in the aircraft, and looking at 443 consecutive missions over a 4.5-year period, the paramedic went down alone in 225 of those. In the remaining 218, the physician also went because the patient required either physician-level interventions or a stretcher winch. In only 22 cases was the patient intubated on the ground. So intubated stretcher winches occur relatively rarely. To put that into perspective, we do about 2 winches a week, about one a week will involve a doctor, but only about once every 2.5 months does any doctor perform an intubated stretcher winch. Now we have between 40 and 50 doctors in our service, and so you can see that they're sharing out these winches between them, and therefore an individual doctor won't really average more than 1 or 2 winches a year, and an intubated stretcher winch will be a very rare occurrence for any individual doctor. So that begs the question, do we need doctors to winch, or could we just get the paramedics to do all the winching? Why would we want to do that? Well, many of our doctors are registrars doing 6 or 12-month terms. They're not permanent members of staff, and so there's a high training burden, and with that comes a cost and a potential risk associated with a lack of familiarity with the system. So would we minimize risk and cost by not winching physicians? Well, we might, but there are a couple of reasons why we should keep winching physicians. One is there's only 2 clinical members of the team, paramedic and a doctor, and sometimes having 2 people on the ground helps that winch mission progress more smoothly and more quickly and more safely, with a buddy to do checks with and someone to help with the packaging and care of the patient. In terms of advanced level interventions, we had a look over a 2.5-year period, and this research which was published showed that of 120 physician missions that were conducted involving a winch, a significant number required some predefined physician level interventions, or physician only interventions, something only our physicians in our service are permitted to do, which might mean rapid sequence intubation, thoracostomy, ketamine sedation, and so on. This was a total of 63 physician-only interventions on 48 patients. So this was another reason for continuing to train our physicians in winch operations. Now, having said that, currently within New South Wales Ambulance there is a new ketamine analgesia protocol that's approved for paramedic use. So it may well be that a number of those previously defined physician-only interventions could have been managed under the current guidelines by our paramedics. Nevertheless, once they've had ketamine, they probably need a stretcher, and therefore they need 2 people on the ground, one to manage the stretcher, one to manage the tagline. So it's going to be very, very difficult to remove physicians altogether, and I think they're with us on the winch missions for the foreseeable future. So how do we train them for the mission? Well, all new doctors have to undergo 1 full day of ground training with classroom work and static winch work by the helicopter in the hangar, and then several days of actual helicopter training on both helicopter platforms, the AW139 and the EC145, although currently 6-month registrars are only trained to winch on the 139, but they will fly in both aircraft. So this is potentially the first winch mission that a physician will do in the AW139. And the risk here is that during training, the helicopter winching has a maximum height to minimize risks. But then you go out on a real mission and you might be being winched from a very high height here, using a large length of winch cable onto an area that itself is very high above the ground. And so we need to psychologically prepare for this difference between training and reality. The other thing is the powerful rotor sound and downwash of the 139 can be really quite striking the first time you come across it on the ground. There's a risk that branches can be blown down onto rescuers, patients, or other civilians on scene. And here's an example of what that noise and downwash can look like. And this slide shows the example of this relatively rare event once every 2.5 months of an intubated patient requiring winching, where the SCAT paramedic has established some roping lines to secure the patient and secure equipment, such as the steepness of the incline that they're working on. And this clearly is a very cognitively demanding and clinically challenging job that then is going to be followed by potentially very high winch operation. So there's a lot going on that we have to be extremely well prepared for. Other ways we train are having annual full clinical line checks where we do a full simulated winch mission with a simulated casualty. This is on a hot summer's day. The sweat dripping off the paramedic and doctor here is very real. The mannequin has been intubated after a full RSI scenario, and then the two clinicians on the ground are preparing their pre-winch checks, which is the something we abbreviate to SPECTRE, involving checking of stretcher, patient, environment, connectors, tagline, equipment, and radio. This is done as a team in a challenge response fashion prior to winching up. Another way we can prepare is by putting our new doctors with New South Wales Ambulance through some vertical access training and environmental awareness training, where they work on rope, on an incline, onto a rock platform, and then they manage simulated critically injured casualties, during which they have to perform rapid sequence intubation on rope, where there's a risk of losing equipment off the side of the ledge, and of course potential risks to the rescuers. And you can see here there's several scenarios going on at any one time to get the most out of this training day. Other things can go wrong during winch missions. You can go into a spin, which can leave you disorientated and nauseated and incapable of looking after your patient in the short term. And as I've said before, branches can be blown down and can strike people. That has happened. And of course, these issues can range to the more serious and even fatal, and we have had one very sad incident where we lost a treasured member of our team during a winch-related accident. So we have to take this extremely seriously and reduce risks whenever we can. There can be equipment-related issues. We've demonstrated that certain bag valve mask devices fail to self-inflate under the forceful downwash of our helicopter, so equipment selection has to be appropriate for the mission. And by reviewing all of these issues and trying to suck learning points from every single winch mission, we can minimize our risks and optimize our safety. And some changes we've instituted as a result of this have included installation of winch cameras, the introduction of new advanced radio communications, changes to our training, and so on. Now, this following sequence is taken from the BBC series Helicopter Heroes Down Under. It's an early cut just with a little bit of incidental music, and it's reproduced with the permission of the BBC, and it demonstrates a registrar shortly after her induction training going on a real winch mission. It's a rescue of a patient injured on a beach. The 139 is heavy and, as you can see, has wheels, not skids, and therefore has a tendency to sink into sand. So we don't land it on the beach. We'll often exit as a hover exit, and then when we have our patient to be extracted in a stretcher, we will winch them up onto the aircraft, and that's the sequence that you'll see here.
ETA overhead approximately 4 minutes.
And let us know, mate, when we're passing through 1,000 and happy for us to come on to Wanderloo.
Okay.
Mark and I will just finish up the cabin setup.
Roger. Well, it's a female, and I think at the beginning of that conversation I heard Southern Ops go the Minamara end, but for us it's a few seconds anyway.
Alright boys, clearing the Wanderloo when you're ready.
Copy, mate. Cross-checked onto Wanderloo. Yep, happy with that, Wombles, and we're coming off seatbelt.
32-year-old female out surfing. She got dumped off the wave, landed heavily on her head. She's got severe pain to the high cervical area.
Yep.
She's got no deficit. She's got tingling in the extremities, but doing on test, they're equal, all that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
cleared up to there. She has got the pain in the neck though,
Yeah.
and central in the trapezius.
Flight 167. Yeah, thanks mate. Just waiting for this patient to be finally ready. Just confirm that the roads are okay for us to get through.
Oh, we'll just do a recce circuit, mate, at the moment.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
136.
Still to confirm the cab's secure.
So it'll be right circuit back up the beach to the north with the wind on the right hand side. Yep. Be class 1 helipad, mate. It's been nice and shallow. My LDP will be, say, 150 above the beach. Overshoot will be slightly right out to sea into wind.
No worries, mate. Secure. Confirm speed is still below 80 for the radar. Southern control, roger, much caution, right door coming open. Right door's back and locked, target area is now on the right.
Yeah, follow
430.
122.
So you could see there that the patient was extricated by a stretcher winch. The physician accompanied the patient. The paramedic managed the tag line to stop the winch stretcher from spinning. The physician's responsibility once entering the cabin is to secure the stretcher, secure herself, get herself back on the intercom system, and then get ready to help receive the paramedic and the remainder of the equipment and secure that equipment and help the paramedic onto their wander lead and back onto the intercom system. It's only through rigorous training and adherence to standard operating procedures with high fidelity simulation that we can make this as safe as possible and trying to learn as much as possible from any incident in the context of a no blame culture. Winching should be considered one of the last options when other reasonable alternatives have all been ruled out. In the words of some of our colleagues on the base when interviewed prior to giving this presentation, one colleague said that rescue helicopters all over the world conduct unnecessary winching operations for sometimes simple convenience or good publicity. But just because one has always done it a certain way doesn't make it right. These operations are, in the most part, completed without incident, partly due to good luck. But issues will arise when you least expect it, and you need to be able to justify what you were doing in the event that things don't go perfectly. The value of experienced, dedicated, winch-trained crews brings to these operations is only known when the task or the environment becomes challenging, and there's something that can potentially go wrong. And as one person said, the problem is you won't know that until it's too late. So you can't state strongly enough the value of experienced, dedicated, highly trained professional air crew people and pilots and rigorous simulation training and regular currency testing of the clinical crews.